The U.S. Navy is working to recover every last piece of debris from the Chinese spy balloon. The Navy has released these photos of sailors pulling parts of the massive balloon out of the water. The military shot it down Saturday off the coast of South Carolina. We're now learning Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin attempted to call his Chinese counterpart after taking down the balloon, but Beijing declined to pick up the phone. The United States' fragile relationship with China goes well beyond espionage. In recent years, U.S. officials have raised concerns over trade, China's next steps on Taiwan, and how transparent Beijing has been about the spread of COVID-19 and its origins. CBS News chief foreign affairs correspondent and Face the Nation moderator, Margaret Brennan, joins me now. Margaret, it's so nice to be here with you in person. Okay, Lloyd Austin gets on the phone and they don't answer. Of course, he could have called the meteorologist because they said it was a weather balloon, but his counterpart didn't pick up. Is that a big deal?
It's not a good sign. Usually, and certainly with this administration, they argue they want to keep open lines of communication. If you remember, a few months ago, China had cut some of those off, and there had been celebration when the hope of diplomacy was there. That was part of laying the groundwork for all these meetings with Secretary Yellen, met with her counterpart. Secretary Blinken was meeting with his. It was sort of starting to thaw this relationship after Xi Jinping, the president of China, had just reaffirmed his leadership for this third term. The thought was there's more confidence, we can start having more openness. And so to literally refuse the phone call after an incident like that, it certainly doesn't help.
And in the speech tonight, will President Biden talk about the balloon?
It's look, I'm trying not to make a silly anecdote here, but look, with the balloon, it is hard not to acknowledge it, but the president's going out of his way not to refer to it. You'll hear him refer obliquely to the idea of defending American sovereignty and the concept of sovereignty. That's where he's going to find that connective tissue between, U.S. interests in Ukraine, pushing back against Russia, and here in the U.S., pushing back against China. But with this administration, so much of their focus is on not escalating, not making things worse with China, because this is such a high-stakes relationship. They are the economic, technological, military power the U.S. sees as the prime competitor. So President Biden is going to talk about managing competition without emphasizing this particular incident, which is kind of hard to believe given that it's so in front of center for people right now.
Can you give me a sense of this incident in the context of Biden's larger project on China? Because his first foreign trip to Europe, he was talking to Europe about we need to focus on China, constrain China. He's put in place trade restrictions. The CHIPS Act, which increases domestic production of chips, is to basically compete with China. He's been doing a lot on China. Does this, and we don't know the fallout, right, of this yet. I mean, it could be an intelligence failure. It could be an intelligence gain. But is there a way to put this in the context of the larger project that Biden has been on in terms of pinning back China?
This is the relationship they step most carefully around and have been the least explicit about in terms of articulating their policy. It's literally like they paint over every little thing. We've known, for example, this executive order is supposed to be coming to further restrict U.S. investment in industries in China that have deep ties into their military establishment. That's been months and months and months. Literally, we've been debating what to do about TikTok for years. So we don't have a lot of those specifics. But what we do have from President Biden is this emphasis on trying to lower the temperature, but also keep America competitive. That $50 billion spent on the CHIPS Act, which was basically to help wean the U.S. off of Taiwan and minimize exposure to Asia in the event of a potential conflict with China. Right. These are the things he is doing to try to shore up U.S. defenses without saying we're taking you head on.
Right,
and that is really how they do this. Now, since November, that was when Xi Jinping and President Biden met. They've been trying to reopen these lines of communication. And that's how you heard this trip Secretary Blinken was supposed to be taking that was called off abruptly because of the balloon, characterized as a continuation of that opening. It's such a black box around Xi Jinping right now for the Biden administration. And so they are stepping very, very carefully. But what's happening with the further reporting around the intelligence in this balloon, it's going to be a drip, 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 because Congress is about to be briefed in the next few days. And from what we've seen from those initial briefings to Senate intelligence, there's not a lot of happiness with the fact that this balloon entered U.S. airspace to begin with.
Right. Okay, quickly on Ukraine, before we skip to the economy, how much of a pitch does the president have to give tonight to keep the U.S. support for Ukraine, political support?
Well, I mean, it's hard to believe that a year ago the invasion hadn't even happened. I mean, this transformed and really hit the reset button on geopolitics. Yeah. It's pretty incredible. So he's going to stand up there and try to take some credit for helping to midwife the expansion of NATO and keep the Western alliance together behind Ukraine against Russia. The Ukrainian ambassador will be sitting with the First Lady. There is expectation to continue that bipartisan support, but you know and I know, rhetorically, there are more Republicans on the right of their own party who are raising questions, and progressives on the left, about the degree to which there is just sort of a blank check, as Speaker McCarthy put it. But there is more oversight. There's a lot of focus right now on the really boring kind of accounting firms and those trying to oversee the spending of U.S. dollars. But on this issue, the administration also points to the fact that in that last Congress, before Speaker Pelosi left, they locked in funding that should take them through this fiscal year. So on paper, the money takes them to September. At the current burn rate, may only take them to May in terms of what's happening on the battlefield. And the hope is that bipartisan support will continue, but it's not guaranteed.
Speaking of bipartisanship, finally on the debt ceiling, what's your kind of gut feeling about the sense of urgency and whether President Biden really wants to have a big, huge knockdown fight over the debt ceiling, or whether he'd like to kind of help Kevin McCarthy solve it and say, see, I'm the guy who brought things back to normal in Washington?
I think rhetorically he's been trying to lean into this idea of helping him along. He had all these kind things to say at the prayer breakfast, for example, about really respecting his counterpart, trying to lower the temperature a little bit. And that's interesting for Speaker McCarthy to see how that plays out. I think the Democrats don't mind having the focus be on the Republican leader trying to manage his own constituency, for example. But as we get closer and closer, it becomes a real issue. And these are hard things to break apart. Right. Is there a compromise in there? That's certainly what Speaker McCarthy and others are signaling at this point, that they want this to be something that doesn't crater the economy.
All right, Margaret Brennan, good to be with you. I'll be with you again later.